Okay, welcome to the public hearing for Tuesday, August 8th, 2023. This public hearing is being held pursuant to Section 465 of the Local Government Act. All members of the public will be given a reasonable time to be heard or to present written submissions respecting matters contained in the bylaw that is the subject of this hearing. All information, correspondence, petitions, or reports that have been received by noon today concerning the subject bylaw have been circulated to council and are available to the public as part of the meeting package. Staff will provide their report, followed by an opportunity for the applicant to speak. Members of the public who have pre-registered to speak have been added to the speakers list in the order that the requests were received. Those pre-registered will be provided the opportunity for public comment according to the order of the speakers list, followed by comment from those who have not pre-registered. Anyone who has not pre-registered can still attend council chambers and wait to speak following those on the speakers list, or alternatively can electronically participate by calling the conference line during the live hearing at 778-907-2071 and entering meeting ID 506-489-9374 and passcode 485186. Speakers will be asked to state their name and civic address. Please note that all representations, whether written, verbal, or electronic, are available to the public for viewing as part of the public record. Remarks will be limited to 5 minutes per speaker and should include all the relevant information in their presentation. Further opportunity will be afforded to all members of the public to speak a second time or a third time with new information only once all persons have had an opportunity to speak. Council may ask questions of staff, the applicant, and the public, but once the public hearing is over, no new information can be received. Council debate on the bylaw will take place during the regular council meeting following the conclusion of the public hearing. At that time, any questions of staff will be for clarification purposes only. The corporate officer will now provide information on the notice of this public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor Holmes. So notice that the public hearing was given by posting on the public notice boards at Municipal Hall, the website, and in the Summerland Review issues of July 27th and August 3rd, 2023. In addition, 50 notices were mailed to owners and occupiers of surrounding properties on July 1st, 2023.
Thank you. Now I'll ask our director, who's taking this? Mr. Baker. There you go.
Thank you, Mayor Holmes. All right, thank you very much. So just to introduce the application, number Z23002, located at 1719 Britton Street. It's a zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the property from RSD3 to RSD1 to allow for a 2-lot subdivision. All right, so just to go review the zoning here. So it's a predominantly residential area, and the zones that allow for are predominantly for single detached dwellings. So RSD3 down to RSD1. Across Burton Road, there's a commercial RV dealership, and beyond the highway, there's agricultural lands, predominantly orchards and vegetable and berry fields in the area as well. There's some parks, most notably in Powell Beach Park, Woodbridge Nature Reserve, and Stoner Street and Wharf Street boat launches, and the area is serviced by Trail Creek Elementary School. So for the OCP, prominent designations there are residential, agricultural, commercial, administrative, and parks. So just a little aerial view of the property there. So the site is currently vacant. There are some fruit trees found throughout the site. The applicant has noted that they would like to save some trees so long as they do not interfere with the building area. There are large mature pine trees located in the southeast portion of the lot. However, it has been noted that those trees will remain and are on the other property just to the east there. So again, this property is within a predominantly low density residential neighborhood. However, it is starting to densify with the rezoning and subdivision to create smaller lots. Again, predominantly in the single detached dwelling housing form. So the proposal, should the rezoning be approved, a subsequent subdivision would occur, which would create two lots. Lot A, which is 462 square meters. Now that lot is an interior lot abutting Britain Road, and lot B, which is 568.8 square meters, which is on the corner there, abutting Britain Road and Wharf Street with access from Britain Road. The proposal is consistent with the requirements of the RSD1 zone. And this is the zoning amendment bylaw on your screen there. Again, just to rezone from RSD3 to RSD1 to allow two-lot subdivision. And the proposal does comply with the OCP. Just on your screen again, just a zoning comparison between the two, the existing RSD3 zone and the RSD1. Most notable differences are just the lot dimensions and the density. So the official commute plan for the area, or rather for the low density residential designation, is to accommodate a range of housing types. The policies also ensure that residential development is within areas with built infrastructure and services so that there is no excess cost to the district, which would otherwise require capital investments, is to ensure that the residential development avoids natural and hazardous areas. And this is the zoning bylaw here. So just again, just an overview of the very similar zones. Again, it's just the difference between just the lot area dimensions and the density, but very, very similar in what they allow as a principal and accessory, which you can see on your screen there. And just for discussion and really a review, so again, it's to rezone from RSD3 to RSD1. The proposal is within the urban growth boundary. The urban growth boundary is a means to limit urban sprawl, mitigate conflicts between different land uses, and to promote density and infill. The OCP encourages infill development. And to encourage no excess costs to the district. So this is by utilizing existing infrastructure, so water, sewer, storm, reduce costs of the district and residents, as sprawl and greenfield developments can increase service and maintenance to the district. The proposed development conforms with the OCP, and the proposal again meets the requirements of the RSD1 zone in terms of lot area and dimensions, intent of the zone, and the building envelope. The proposed area, or rather the subject property, is within a known floodplain, so won't be any basements. It'll just be at-grade housing. And the proposal is consistent with other similar developments which are occurring in Trout Creek, most notably the 21 lots on Nixon Road, Lighthouse Landing, and 19 lots which were located at Treffy Place. And that concludes my presentation to council.
Okay, thank you very much. Corporate Officer, we received some correspondence, I believe.
Thank you, Mayor Holmes. Yes, we've received two pieces of correspondence, one in favor and another that didn't really seem to take a stance.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to say anything? You don't have to if you don't want to. It's up to you. No? Okay. Don't see any public here. Is anybody online? No? Okay. Council, any questions for anybody? Councillor Peak.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Mr. Bryson, Mr. Baker, rather. I thought I read this, but I can't get my eye at the moment. The entranceway for the properties, will they be on Britain or on the one on Wharf? I just wanted some clarification on that.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Peak. Yes, the accesses will be from Britain Road. Yeah, so the parcels will be accessed from Britain.
Very good. My other question, if I may, Mr. Mayor, when we do divisions of property like this, which I think is a fine idea for this, for the kind of urban territory we have in Trout Creek, and infilling is a good thing. We're looking for more housing and the opportunity is great. Are there any costs associated that are attributed to the dividing of the property? So is there anything that goes towards water and sewers or anything like that? I just don't know, and I'm asking the question.
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Pig, I can probably answer that one best. So for any new lot that is created, they are subject to our DCC bylaw. So that's one way we are able to get offsite payments for water and sewer contributions, as well as roads and park areas for every new lot that's created in the community. On top of that, usually for subdivisions, we require frontage improvements. That would be the infrastructure up to the center line of the roadway. In this case, because it's a corner parcel, it'd be up to the center line of Britain as well as Wharf being upgraded, which would include curb and gutter, and then road and repaving on Britain and Wharf.
Do we actually have curb and gutter on those? I don't think we do on Wharf. I haven't been on Britain, so I'm looking down, I don't think there are, but if there were, then they would be levied for that as well.
Through your worship to Councillor Pig, that we would make the applicant construct that on our behalf.
Okay, thank you very kindly.
Okay, thank you. I think I just need to call for a second time if there's any member of the public who'd like to speak. And a third time if any member of the public would like to speak. Seeing none, no further questions, I'll call the public hearing closed. And I'll call to order the regular council evening meeting of Tuesday, August 8th, 2023. This meeting is being recorded live and is streaming on the District of Summerland YouTube channel. All representations to council, written or verbal, will form part of the public record and be available to the public for viewing electronically or as a written record. Corporate officer, any late items? No late items. Again, approval of the agenda. Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Betts, all in favor? That carries. The consent agenda. Couple of minutes. Anybody want to remove any of those? No? Someone want to move the consent agenda? Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Trainer, all in favor? That carries. Bylaws from the public hearing. We'll go straight into it. That's to consider the bylaw. Don't think we need the presentation again. So we'll just need either council questions for clarification only or a motion. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, that I moved the staff recommendation.
Okay, can we just get that up on the screen? Is that possible? Oh, yes, a second, Councillor Trainer. There we go. Okay, that's the bylaw for the subdivision and no comment. I'll call the question. All in favor? None opposed. That carries. Moving on to my mayor's report. With the smoky skies and the Eagle Bluff fire burning to our south, it's an appropriate time for the district to update its climate change risk assessment, which identifies climate-related impacts on municipal assets, and its hazard risk and vulnerability analysis, which assesses all kinds of risks to the whole community. As part of the review process, our sustainability coordinator organized a 2-day workshop on July 25th and 26th that I attended along with Councillor Betts and Councillor Peak and senior district staff and representatives from several relevant community and regional organizations, including the Chamber of Commerce, the Regional District, and Interior Health. Together, we considered various potential hazards and rated the consequences should they strike Summerland. We looked at wildfires, landslides, floods, drought, extreme heat, extreme cold, pandemics, cyber attacks, plane crashes, you name it. When conducting a HRVA, that's the acronym for the Hazard, Risk, and Vulnerability Analysis, it's important to not only consider the consequence, but also the frequency or likelihood of a disaster happening. Even though a hazard is likely to occur, the consequences could be minimal. Or there could be a hazard that's unlikely to occur, but if it did, the consequences would be devastating. And there's all kinds of ranges in between. All the data from the workshop will be collated and charted to produce an updated HRVA, which will come to a future meeting of council. The HRVA, which is provincially mandated, is important for planning purposes and for establishing priorities to mitigate hazards and prepare for emergency response and recovery. On July 27th, the day after the Hazard, Risk, and Vulnerability Workshop, I attended a RDOS workshop. That was a training workshop on emergency management for senior officials. The training covered the legislative responsibilities of local government in an emergency, as well as the role of an emergency operations center, when to declare a state of local emergency, and the need to work together as a region based on capability and capacity. The Eagle Bluff Fire is a good example of the region working together, including the coordination of emergency support services, which is coming from Summerland, led by Bonnie Bordas. Councillor Van Elfen and I attended the Regional District's regular board meeting on August 3rd, where the board reviewed public feedback to revisions to the South Okanagan Regional Growth Strategy, which proposes to remove Greta Ranch, Willow Beach, and Anarchist Mountain as rural growth areas. The proposal was also to designate Naramata and Kaleden as village center designations that would allow for some densification. However, following board discussion, staff were directed, that's RDOS staff, were directed to instead bring forward a bylaw designating all of Naramata and all of Kaleden as rural residential areas. On July 24th, Deputy Mayor Traynor, CAO Stat, and I met with senior management at the Summerland Research and Development Center to discuss the facility's role and importance to the community, in particular in respect to public access to the ornamental gardens and the former superintendent's residence. We also provided an update on the establishment of a food hub, and they in turn asked for our assistance speaking to the province about traffic issues with the Research Center intersection and Highway 97. A delegation from the Ministry of Transportation happened to be at the August 3rd RDOS meeting, so I was able to convey their concerns. I have also written to MLA Ashton in respect to highway safety through the length of Summerland. Speaking of the food hub, on July 6th, CAO Stat and I, along with Charles Cornell from Community Futures, met with Member of Parliament Teiko Van Popta, who is the opposition critic for PacificCan. That's the federal agency responsible for economic development in BC. I met with Mr. Van Popta when I was in Ottawa at the end of May, and he happened to be in the Okanagan. So we met with him to further our discussion about the food hub and Community Futures grant application to PacificCan. Finally, on July 31st, Councillor Barkwell and I attended the Chamber of Commerce annual general meeting, and I had the pleasure of swearing in 2 young local business people as new chamber board members, Callan Power and Nelson Anaable. It's always encouraging to see the next generation taking on leadership roles and contributing to the community in positive ways. 9 other chamber board members have a year remaining in their terms and will be staying on. making it a very diverse and capable chamber board. I'm confident they will serve as a strong, unified voice for local business and a reliable partner for the district as we work together for the betterment of Summerland. That's my report, and I'll ask the CAO for his report.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm excited to report that all of Giants Head Road from Harris Road to Hillborn Street has now been paved with twin water lines beneath the road surface to support future water separation. Road painting actually starts tonight. Additional signage is also forthcoming to support road safety, and the addition of the allowance for bikes along the roadway and on the separated multi-use trail will also support public safety. We will schedule an official opening announcement in the beginning of September. Regarding road improvements, the road work and water infrastructure at Jubilee Road is well underway. In accordance with the cycling master plan, a widened shoulder for two-way bike use will support safe passage for children who frequent the area. It won't restrict the laneways for vehicular traffic. This road standard is implemented as roads are rebuilt and, like links in a chain, will eventually connect to fulfill the ultimate vision of improved active transportation routes in the community. Similarly, we're about to embark on a road project on Victoria Road South from Agar Street to Dunham Crescent, which will also include a multi-use pathway according to the capital plan and designs. As a regular motorist on that road, I will be greatly relieved to not have to worry about pedestrians walking and biking in the traffic lane on that stretch of road, which currently does not have any pedestrian walkway. The Dale Meadows Road and Water Project is also set to begin, and it can't come quick enough. Once again, we had a water break there recently, which required a boil water advisory for residents of the area. It will be wonderful this year to go through the Christmas season without a water main break at that spot. While I'm big on Christmas traditions, this is one tradition I am sure residents would love to end. And this project is going to do just that with the installation of a new water main under the roadway. The Community Energy Association is running their 25th annual award nominations for the 2023 Climate and Energy Action Awards. The district is excited to be part of the 25 total nominations, and winners will be announced at the UBCM convention in Vancouver on September 20th. The nomination is for our battery storage and solar project, and it would be wonderful to receive some recognition for this project, which is being built as we speak. Fingers crossed on that. Due to some unforeseen delays relating to environmental requirements beyond our control, the pier project is currently in a holding pattern. We do anticipate that we will still get done what we hope for this year in our operating window. And I will have further details in my next report on August 29. Finally, I wanted to share the unfortunate news of the unexpected passing of a former employee, Kevin Taylor, from a sudden illness. Kevin was with the district of Summerland as a development planner from September 4th, 2018 to January 3rd, 2020, and was most recently employed as the Director of Corporate and Development Services for the District of Lillooet. While I did not personally work with Kevin, I am told he was well liked by his staff peers and was very diligent and professional. On the personal side, Kevin was a smart and witty person who was well liked by everyone who knew him. Our sympathies go out to the district of Lillooet and friends and family who will certainly miss his presence and zest for life. Thought I'd complete my report.
Thank you, CO. Certainly, I think many of us who are in previous councils remember Kevin and his amazing presentations. He was a very talented planner. I'll write a card on behalf of council and send it to the Lillooet Council, Mayor and Council, and asking them to pass on our condolences to Jeremy and Kevin's family. If anybody, any member of council or staff would like to add their comments to that card, I think that'd be appreciated too. So just let me know. Okay. Does anybody have anything to ask or say in regard to either of our reports? No? Okay, we'll move on to the public comment opportunity. No, nobody online. No. Development reports, Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation, Mr. Baker. You don't want that one?
Oh,
There's no presentation. Oh, okay.
Sorry, yes, there's just no staff presentation for this report.
Okay. Then open up to council for questions. Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just wondering how this process of this one works. You submit your 7 priorities that you think match their priorities, but there's no dollar amounts attached to this application. Like, where does that part come in? Like, what are we applying for? Because I read their website and it was kind of vague and.
Thank you for the question. Through the chair to councillor. Yeah, so in 2022, the federal government, as part of their budget, set aside $4 billion for the Canadian Housing Mortgage Corporation to create the Housing Accelerator Fund with the intention to assist local governments to basically incentivize and get housing built faster. And so through the CMHC portal, local governments are able to apply based on, coming up with 7 provisions that are required by the project. So that could be anything from, ensuring, a certain amount of multifamily units for projects, trying to reach targets and goals. Could look at upzoning properties in the district. Could look at even, which the province has through their legislation, Local Government Act. If a development is consistent with the official community plan, a public hearing wouldn't be required. So sort of like stuff like that. So its intention is to allow housing just to get built faster. So what the district has, and the portal ends it's August 18th. So it's a really tight deadline. So the district's staff believe that we could, by requesting council to, I believe it's 15,000 from the accumulated surplus, support the creation of the application fund. So that 15,000 would be provided to Urban Systems to apply on our behalf.
But apply for what?
Oh, sorry, the Housing Accelerator Fund.
Mr. Delvin.
Yeah, if I may try to answer that question a little better. It's complex, I guess, is to wrap it all up. This Housing Accelerator Fund has a series of different type of formulas on the amount of grant funding that you can achieve based on the amount of additional housing units you can project over on top of what your current housing projections are. That's why they need the housing needs assessment to be completed and in place for you to be eligible to apply. So basically, we at the staff level, and there's the reason why there is a request in the council motion to use some consulting funds to do this, is to further project how much additional housing we could achieve within our community if we were to implement certain policy changes through our bylaws and OCP zoning through discussion with the community. And at a minimum of 7, you can't have just 1 or 2. You need to have a minimum of 7 different initiatives to increase the number of housing units that is over and above what's already projected for your community. So, and they have formulas built on that, and that's how much grant funding you could be eligible for. We haven't in detail developed that yet. We have to do it within the next week and a half, basically. We have some ideas that are related to council's project priority on infill development housing. Like as an example, we've had some discussions at the Development Process Improvement Committee to look at our zoning bylaw with regards to duplexes. It's kind of creating a disincentive to encourage that zoning, as well as potentially allowing secondary suites within duplexes, which has been considered by council, but none of that has been really discussed with the public. So a lot of the costs that we are applying for through this grant would be through engagement with the community. In terms of actual, that's the grant, what we'd be using the grant funding for would be engagement to meet council's intention for increasing potentially infill development within our existing single family areas, mainly around the downtown core, but also throughout town that are within our urban growth boundary. So it's not quite clear yet, but we do want to use that funding to move forward with those 7 initiatives that are envisioned.
Councilor Barkle.
Yeah, so the thing that, when I looked at their website, and I didn't spend a whole lot of time, but I saw this point system that they had and stuff, but it seemed like there was money there that was for the one thing that we're always interested in is money for infrastructure. So, we've got lots of infrastructure projects on the table. If we could get some funding for them through this application process, like, couldn't we argue that Eco Village would be additional, housing units that wouldn't have been on the table when we did our original plan, that you're supporting this application?
Yeah, through your worship to Councilor Barkwell. Initially, we thought at the staff level, we thought about that idea as well. There is a stream for infrastructure related projects that are in support of new housing initiatives. So, but in initial discussions with Urban Systems, who are helping a number of local governments with their grant applications because the timing is incredibly tight. They feel that if we went that route too far, we're going to be unsuccessful. That the CMHC, the federal government, really wants to see direct housing being proposed from your policy and bylaw changes, not necessarily infrastructure related initiatives, more so bylaw policy related changes that are already within your set priorities for your local government, maybe even planned for within your OCP, that they can easily target to try to increase housing. So it's all related to this theme of how much more units can we encourage. So definitely there could be some projects that, like, for example, like water servicing in the downtown core, if we're deficient in water fire flow to allow for new housing, they would be willing to, I think, consider that as part of the application. But it needs to be, again, directly attributed to those new units that you're forecasting from those changes, if that makes sense.
Councilor Trainer.
Brad, do you know what the range of grant funding is that they're giving out? Like, what are you thinking? Is it like $1 million or is it, 50,000?
That's a good question. I think there's a lot of uncertainty as to the upper limits. I know Tyson can correct me if there's any maximum. I don't think it's all based on this formula that we have per the housing units that you're envisioning to be projected from your policy changes. So yeah, because there is no maximum, I like at staff level, as well as talking with Urban Systems, it's most likely going to be oversubscribed by local governments across Canada, but there is an opportunity there for us as well.
I just have a quick follow up to that. So in the head or in the resolution, it says it's an accelerator fund for a large urban stream. So is this something that's focused on larger communities? Is there a different one for smaller communities?
Yes. So through Mayor to Councillor Trainer. So it's the large urban stream is for communities with a population of 10,000 residents or more.
So we're yes, it used to be. Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm still a little unclear about what the funds are being distributed for. Is it for helping us develop additional public policy and bylaw amendments, or is it for helping us get homes built?
Through your worship to Council Betts. Yeah, I think the first part of what your answer was to your own question there was correct. That primarily they want to see new bylaws and policies being developed through the community and through changes to our zoning bylaw as an example, or official community plan through our procedural bylaw. They also mentioned digital permitting as a stream, which is something we're already targeting. And we have grant funding already for. But there are other municipalities that are not in the same boat as us. And so they might be looking at that stream more than us. But in looking at council's priorities, we think that targeting this infill priority of councils, it was set to be initiated next year in 2024, which would perhaps line up well with when we'd be getting this grant funding. It would help us with the engagement process of having this community discussion on infill, and as well as perhaps then leading into further support at the staff level for actually going forward with bylaw and policy changes for our community.
I guess the hard thing is, we're spending $15,000 for, we don't really know what, we don't really know what we're applying for. That's what's really hard to wrap our heads around. Or, you almost think you could do a lot of this work with that 15,000. Councillor Patton and then Peak.
Thank you, Worship. So Brad, in reviewing Penticton, Blake has said, or Mr. Levin has said, that they're going to be eligible for up to $10 million with the 7 initiatives that they have that they're putting forward. And one of the initiatives was the pre-zone strategic area. Would that not be very similar to what we're actually looking for Eco Village? Would that not kind of fall in there? Because we were also looking at pre-zoning that for develop, or are we not that far ahead yet to be able to be even looking at something along those lines?
Yeah, through your worship with Councillor Patton. Yeah, see, I think Blake, based on their analysis, they're probably a little bit further ahead of than us in terms of they've already done their projections. They figured out how much based on those formulas that they could be eligible for grant. It could be substantial if they're successful with their grant application. And because they're forecasting a whole bunch more units to be proposed from this grant application. I think the pre-zoning idea is definitely one we've talked about in the past, specifically for the downtown neighborhood plan is one area where we've talked about that idea. And I think there's a lot of merit for that approach to encourage new investment. It wasn't something specifically we were looking at for the Eco Village area, because that would be one that we're kind of keeping as a side project, as a different focus rather than just housing units and affordable housing. It's more focused on creating the right type of development for someone else to take on, not us. Yeah.
Councillor Peak.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I wanted to emphasize that I do believe that the policy and the zoning for our downtown projects would offer a real opportunity within the neighborhood surrounding that area for infilling. And it might be with a discussion with the community, maybe it's that you can do fourplexes on some property. We know that there are some deficits in terms of water pipage, and that we've had some applications that have fallen through in this area because those kind of things did not support the kind of development that might have been possible otherwise. So I see a really strong opportunity to work this forward. And I think that in the long run, the $15,000 would be well spent to do this. Maybe even more particularly because Urban Systems has been working with others, and sometimes the background that they can bring into it creates another cushion around the discussions that we would already be having.
Okay, so would someone like to bring a motion forward, please? Counselor Peak,
I'll bring the staff motion forward.
and a seconder. Counselor Betts, we just get that up on the screen. Any discussion to the motion? Counselor Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I see these points of discussion as really valid in that the uncertainty and the vagaries around the application are a lot. We're trying to manage the public purse in the most efficient way possible. But I do think the opportunity for a return on investment is high here, especially if, for example, we can identify an infrastructure deficit that maybe this will help identify that, and we might get some funding towards helping so that we can intensify some infill redevelopment. But it's a lot of what ifs. So I'm going to hope that this will be a good investment from my perspective.
Yeah, thank you. I certainly understand what you're saying. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. The overview of the Eco Village Sustainability Framework. Our Sustainability Coordinator, Odessa Cohen, please.
Great. Good evening, Council and Mayor. So for today, I will be going and doing an overview of the sustainable frameworks that I've reviewed over the last couple months as part of a way to help Council with their decision-making around the Eco Village concept plan and future subdivision and land rezoning. So for this presentation, I'm going to do a very brief project background, just to get to the reason why we're doing this overview, the concept plan values for the Eco Village itself. Then I'll do a very brief high-level framework review, just to provide just the key points from each one and comments on them, and then the recommendation will be provided at the end. So April 25th, 2022, Council approved the Eco Village conceptual plan. This included a large, basically overview of what could happen on the site with a couple different concepts, as well as development of the plan values as a whole, which are basically the guiding points for the Eco Village. The primary goal in itself is a sustainable neighborhood development with integration of sustainable buildings and landscape as well. The sustainable building framework that is being recommended by staff here is intended to be used as a way to build out the land use rezoning and subdivision, but also to provide support to staff in that process and to the future developer so that they understand what is required when they eventually go out to develop the property and the standards that council is expecting for that development as a whole. So the values are really important here. These basically guide the concept plan and what would be expected both from council and ideally the community as well, as there are some thoughts and surveys put out for community feedback. So we've got our First Nation values and perspectives, which have already been partially addressed and looked at through an assessment through the Penticton Indian Band. And that'll largely be the process moving forward. Many of the sustainable frameworks don't really include options for that. So it is on us as a municipal government to apply those values and perspectives and ensure that they're included. Then we have our natural asset management through landscape integration and design. So ensuring that we look at the landscape, what is there currently, ensuring that we protect any places, enhance them or conserve them, depending on the nature of them. Pardon the pun. Community spaces. We also have an idea, of course, bringing people together in this space more than just a residential development. We want people to congregate and use and come together. So that's also really important. Our recreation and active transportation. So this is already a site that has active trails and a high active trail use. So we have our bikers, our runners, our hikers. So they all access that site. So making sure that that is maintained and also integrated and enhanced. Mixed housing. So looking at how we decide to plan out all of our spaces within the eco village, going from townhouses to cottage style single family homes there. So looking at how we decide to plan that out, and the framework will help with that as well. And then low carbon resilience approach is not only integrated in the district's own emissions plans, but it's also here in the conceptual plan. So looking at bringing together adaptation to our hazards and our climate risks, but also at the mitigation side where we look at reducing our emissions, increasing energy efficiency as well, and integrating that in the design and building standards. So for the frameworks that I reviewed, I looked at the LEED neighborhood development, which is a component of LEED as a whole, and it specifically looks at residential neighborhood development, One Planet Living, Envision Sustainable Infrastructure Framework, which is more focused in on the infrastructure side of things, not the housing, and then the Living Community Challenge. So these were all chosen based off of their their knowledge within the industry in itself. Some of these have more knowledge and background than others, but they've all been noted in various capacities and talking with professionals in the field of looking at building frameworks is also green building design. So these are all ones that are familiar and have good references and backgrounds in order to do the review itself. So to start off, I'll just quickly go over the LEED neighborhood development. So this one here informs both neighborhood development, so the building side, as well as the landscape. The overall goal is to achieve greater sustainability and climate resilience. So it brings together two aspects of climate action and sustainability that are really important for a holistic approach to climate action at the neighborhood level. LEED is a globally recognized and renowned certification program in the sustainable building development area. So it's well known, has lots of great resources. It's both used in Canada and the US. So for this one, we either have a plan or a built certification option that we can pursue. Ideally, the built would be the approach that we would do for this one, if chosen. So the credit categories themselves go through the different areas that their credit system works in. So as mentioned before, it's both a building and a landscape approach. So smart location and linkage looks at how the neighborhood links together, both within the community and outside of it. Neighborhood pattern and design, green infrastructure and buildings, looking at how the buildings, whether they're residential or community spaces, integrate green infrastructure approach into the buildings themselves and to the landscape. Innovation and design and regional are on the lower end of the credit system, but they provide opportunities for us to kind of go above and beyond and showcase innovation in the neighborhood development. And then regional priority is actually a really interesting one where it incorporates credits, which are optional in order to meet certain regional priorities. So for us as a municipality, we would look at integrating our existing emission reduction plans, our OCP, into how this development would eventually be built out. So we can get credits for that as well. So looking at the values, I use that as a way to kind of gauge where they range on a scale of red to green. So red is they aren't met at all. Green is that they have met them sufficiently enough that they can provide an aspect of our values into the design. And then orange is kind of a midway point. So First Nations perspectives, nothing is in there. The LCR approach is kind of in there, but not completely. At the end of the day, the major pro to this is that it does both a building and neighborhood impact on the landscape, which is unique for the LEED program. Mostly it applies to buildings on its end. So this is a great way to marry those two together. It's also widely recognized. It has LEED professionals who are specifically trained in certification and understand the program in and outs. So we would have access to those resources in Canada and in BC. So I've been able to connect with folks there and understand that there's local resources that way. Unfortunately, the cons to it, it is very comprehensive. The registration and certification process with its globally recognized system, it also comes with a lot of figurative hoops to go through in order to get there. So just it's really well put together, and that means that there's just a bit more work involved. But at the end of the day, that ends up being a positive for making sure we have a comprehensive neighborhood design. And it does require additional considerations outside of LEED to ensure the project values are met. So as mentioned, First Nation values, that's still on us. And the LCR approach, we would have to kind of buff that up a little bit in order to kind of meet the full capacity of our values for this particular project. So One Planet Living is the next one. So this one here, it was developed in the UK.
Sorry, do
Yep.
you want to take questions? Can you take questions now or just want to save them all to the end?
Yeah, let's save them to the end.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That's
way
okay,
I
Councillor
can,
Patton?
like screen right through it there.
Okay.
Yeah.
carry on. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Just write them down so you don't forget. There's a couple more to go. So this one is developed in the UK by a firm called Bioregional. It's actually designed out of their own eco village that they built in the UK as well. And so it was intended to be a mixed use community with a high efficiency sustainability approach to it. So as a result of that project, they created the One Planet Living program. There is no certification or accreditation. So you go through with their framework, but you don't necessarily get something like LEED where you would get like a gold, silver, or platinum, or you wouldn't get any kind of top tier recognition. However, it is a way to just use their principles that they've developed as a way to apply it to your own community or your own situation and project. So it provides more, the framework as its own, and you figure out how you would like to use it based off of the guiding documents that they have. So an example of the principles themselves just kind of laid out very high level here. So the idea is that you go through with an action plan, you develop that as a way to build out. So in our case, we would build an action plan for the Eco Village project as a way to kind of demonstrate how we would use the principles and which ones. You're not required to use all 10 of them. You can just do the ones that are more critical and important, or what that would make more sense to apply to the Eco Village project. And then there's an optional peer review. So someone from the bioregional organization, the nonprofit itself would come in and just do a review, make sure you're on the right process and that you're kind of checking all the right boxes in order to make that a comprehensive action plan. And then within the framework itself, it includes implementation, monitoring, and reporting, which is just in general a good standard of practice for any kind of action plan or master plan that you have, that you know how you're going to implement it. Then there's monitoring of its successes, either with the indicators that are used in it, and then there's reporting. So you report back either to your community or to your business or your organization as to how well or where you're at with those particular indicators and actions that are in the action plan itself. So compared to the values that we have for the Eco Village, in addition to having no LCR approach components or no First Nations perspectives, they had minimal housing and services addressed within it. So it is more, the framework in itself seems to be more applied to kind of a broader organization and not specifically for just neighborhood development, which is kind of what we're looking for. So that is something that you'd have to boost up on our end, work to figure out how we want to include that as part of the action plan itself, or just in general, the framework. One of the pros that I noticed is the implementation, reporting, and indicators use. As I mentioned before, it's a really good standard of practice for any kind of plan. So that was unique. It goes also beyond the building and landscape sustainability. It's a little bit more versatile, so we have some flexibility, and it's lower cost, which would be on the developer. However, the cons being that the principles aren't very prescriptive. There's a lot to work with, so it would require a lot more potential staff time on our end to develop that out, but also on the developer in the future too. There's missing project values, especially the diversity of housing. That's one that's not very well built out. And unfortunately, because it is out of Canada in the UK, there aren't a lot of examples or any really here in Canada that apply to the neighborhood level. They're more at the UK level, which is a different community and environment, and the resources are quite limited as well. So it has great intents, but there's some cons there to keep an eye on. The next one is the Envision Sustainable Infrastructure Framework. So this one is more of like a infrastructure-based framework. So looking at, our water, roads, sewer, utilities, things like that. And it's used quite extensively across the US and Canada. It's more of a decision-making guide. It's not prescriptive in the sense that you have to do this. It gives you a spectrum of ways to apply it, but it also does the entire life cycle of a project, of an infrastructure project. And it also looks at the long-term and short-term sustainability of one. So they had a really good quote in their documents just saying, are we doing the right project? But also, are we doing the project right? But also, are we doing the right project? So there's two aspects of a project and how you want to look at it, and not just looking at it from one perspective, making sure it integrates well within the community, integrates well within the landscape. So this is one that is unique on its own because it doesn't cover the habitable side of a project. It looks more at the infrastructure. So as mentioned, there's a range of kind of a spectrum of how you can make the project more sustainable. So it ranges from improved to restorative. So if you choose a spectrum for each of the different indicators, which there's a total of 64, you can kind of figure out which one works best and how far you want to go along that spectrum. As a result, the further along you go, the more points you get. So there's a total of 200 in this case for the quality of life section, split into 3 components here. So going on to the next slide here, we've got the pros and cons. So again, because this isn't a housing one, it doesn't address housing or human occupation spaces. There is nothing there, but the LCR approach was a little stronger on this one. It actually had an entire section related to climate resilience and climate risk, which was quite unique. It also doesn't have First Nation perspectives. So overall, it applies the 4 pillars of looking at your sustainability, environment, your economic considerations, your social considerations, and some of the community aspects of it as well. Addresses a gap in sustainable development because there are no frameworks currently that really address wholeheartedly the kind of underground component of a project. It looks at kind of the surface and above, so your landscape and building. The below components, which is what this could apply to in this case, is primarily what this is intended for. Unfortunately, with the cons, it needs to be paired up with another framework, so it doesn't mean it has to work in tandem with another one. And because it is more at the public utility infrastructure scale, there's lots of examples of it, so there's lots of ways for us to apply it and use it with reference to other competing applications. So the last one is our Living Community Challenge. So for this one, it's a little briefer. Unfortunately, with the framework itself, it doesn't have open registration right now. However, the website still has access to the guides and the frameworks as a way to use it if you want to apply it on your own without the need for getting an accreditation or any kind of certification through them. Mainly just because it does provide a sustainable framework for buildings and it has been used in the past quite extensively by some communities. It was appropriate to just look at it and see it if it was a possibility for us to even use, even if we didn't get any kind of formal recognition from them. With that being said, the Living Community Framework bases itself around 7 performance areas, or petals as they call it. Looking at each of those, they then break them out and provide specific areas or targets for each of them, depending on which one you look at. And for the stages of it, if you were to actually go through the full registration, it's a vision and master plan is involved. And then you have implementation and then your certification process. So in our case, we would potentially do it as a vision and master plan and then implement it with just referencing the guidebooks associated with it. So the biggest con, of course, is the fact that we can't get certification, but we can still use the resources provided on their websites. Unfortunately, they didn't have as much of the housing and housing component in their framework. But the LCR approach was also in there, which is really great to see. Otherwise, yeah, it does have a lot of Canadian examples. It is more rigorous compared to other ones. They are very aware of the fact that this is a very rigorous program. So even if the registration was open, we would have to probably step it up quite a bit in order to meet their requirements within that framework and just be really comprehensive in that approach. So at this point, looking at all of those frameworks and looking at the needs of the community for the Eco Village project, as well as council and their consideration for what they would like to see. The recommendation before council right now is that the envisioned framework for the development of utilities and public infrastructure be applied for the Eco Village project, and the lead neighborhood development for the development of the residential buildings and overall community design process also be used for the Eco Village project. Reason being that the majority of the lead ND framework was able to meet more of the the conceptual plan values compared to the other frameworks. And it is quite comprehensive. It has a lot of great integration of both landscape and building. And then of course, using the Envision framework is recommended because it fills again that gap. We don't have that in the lead. We don't have it in the other frameworks. So it is quite unique. And it would provide a very holistic approach to this Eco Village project and ensure that we kind of cover all of our bases from underground all the way up to our buildings and landscape. So that's everything for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Council questions, Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Worship. I do have a question in regards to LEED. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that LEED credits were actually done at the completion of the project. So that that it was done at the end of the project so that it could be verified that it did meet the intent of the LEED program. So how would that fall into play with this for housing and neighborhood development?
Through the chair. So as the district builds out the land use and subdivision component of our part of the work, we'll basically use the framework to guide how we would want to prescribe the land use sections that we have. So under requirements for the developer, they would just be aware of the lead ND prescriptions would be kind of just applied and overlaid on top of it, in addition to being I'm assuming on title, there would be a requirement or a statement that lead ND is expected. You'd put it up to either gold, silver, or platinum, and then we would just further that in how we build out the land use zoning. And then once the developer has that property, they would then have to follow not only the zoning, which aligns with lead ND, but then also the prescriptions under title for lead ND as well. I hope that kind of answers the question.
Almost. The developers or the builders that we would be looking at, or so your main developer that would be taking on this project, or not on behalf of us, but on behalf of himself, and then hire his builders. Those builders would then have to be LEED certified to be able to even bid on the project or to build on that project, or would I understand the frameworks through LEED, and I understand the frameworks through Envision, that we need to have some sort of parameters put in there on what they have to follow. I'm just wondering though, if we're going down the road to a LEED certified developer or builder in residential construction, is that such a thing? I'm just not sure.
I think Mr. Donovan might have something to say about that.
Yeah, if I may, through your worship to Councillor Patton. So what we're asking council is to provide us some targets for some frameworks for us to follow moving to the future with this project. This definitely for the lead framework, we think is the best fit for the private components, the developer, what we put on the developer. The neighborhood development, from what I understand, Odessa, is different than the lead building certification processes that you're probably most familiar with, Councillor Patton, through the building process. It's looking at the lens of the neighborhood as a whole. And definitely it follows a very similar type of process where rather than you're looking at, you have these targets and have set criteria for a building and to reach either a gold or platinum level of LEED certification. You're looking at that from the entire neighborhood context, as opposed to the specific individual building context. So basically what we're saying is that developer, we want you to target LEED neighborhood development, and we can say a minimum level of gold, or maybe not quite platinum, because that's like, it's not achievable because of our research or whatever. But here's the goal, here's the target. This is what we want you to follow. But we need to know what we're targeting now in order to start planning for that in the future. If that makes sense. Because we're starting to craft the zoning, the subdivision, all of those factors are going to be leading into trying to achieve that LEED gold standard that we put on that developer. So that's why we need this decision from council today, that we can put it on the developer in the future. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you.
Councillor Barkma.
Does LEED certification allow gas heat? Because we don't want gas. I heard that today.
Mr. Deloitte.
Yeah, thanks for that segue, lead in, I guess, to gas. I think there might be an opportunity with this project to especially if it is lending us to some of the targets within both these standards, to look at the zero carbon standard as an opportunity for this project, as a model of, this is very clearly one of the values on that list that Odessa has provided is low carbon future. So there could be a good opportunity to kind of explore this new standard from the province and say, hey, this is one project we want to target for it as an example project.
CO stat.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to underscore with the staff advice on the LEED in particular, and layering on now the zero carbon, I really think it's important that whatever council chooses is something that has a level of public awareness and credibility, because that is going to add to, sort of that overall credit that the broader community, across BC included, understands what we're doing. I think if we pick types and kinds of things and names of things and a mix and match and the ad hoc, what it does is it kind of erodes the credibility of the overall project, including those who wish to buy in these kinds of communities, because ultimately we want to build this sort of niche and forward thinking and cutting edge development, but also want it to be recognizable from a product perspective, what people expect and understand, and have those sort of analogs of things that have been built elsewhere. So that's why I really like the LEED in particular of this. And I think that zero carbon is also starting to emerge as a cutting edge area, as we heard this afternoon rather, in the afternoon meeting. So thank you.
So, but on that, I mean, can the step code net zero be a framework in itself? Or is it, I'm a bit confused between, where it fits into all this. Okay.
Well, maybe I'll start and then Des can fill in. I think it dovetails quite nicely into this. Again, these two things are looking at the neighborhood context, like LEED and ND is looking at neighborhood level, Envision is looking at infrastructure related to the neighborhood development. Now, the zero carbon looks at specific buildings. So definitely, I think it could help us achieve those levels of LEED certification that we want to achieve. So I think it would potentially help us. But this is what we need now to kind of get into that finer detail and help us at the staff level decide how we get to that certification process. That makes Odessa if it's sense.
Yes, through the chair. So yes, I completely agree. Like the BC building code standards that are out there right now for the province of BC, those should always be considered as part of any project. This is, yeah, and as a way to enhance it. We're trying to go above and beyond the step code and the zero carbon step code that was put out recently this spring. So those only really address just houses and building. They don't go to that neighborhood level where we want to look at bikes and pathways and accessibility in community spaces. It doesn't address that. So that's very much one component of sustainability. This builds it out at the neighborhood level, which is what we really want to see at the it's an eco village. So we want to build a village that has that sustainability component to it. And I think too, like that, if that's council's direction, is that we go forward with, going to building out with the step code and looking at that zero carbon component, that can definitely be at the discretion of council to add on, but it definitely needs something else, just needs a little bit more bite. And the LEED neighborhood design, as mentioned before too, it really does look at a village more comprehensively than what any of these other frameworks have looked at. And it really does break it down. Their checklist is quite detailed. And then they've got an entire booklet as a way to prescribe specific metrics for each of those credits. So there's a lot of detail. It's very prescriptive. So it really does allow us to kind of pinpoint how much we want to go into this, depending on what level of LEED ND we want to go for, whether it's certified or platinum or gold. So.
Thank you. Councillor Peak.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I clearly feel that the LEED neighborhood development as part of the projection of what we wish to accomplish is really, really important. With LEEDs, it is recognizable. The neighborhood program is perhaps newer than the LEEDs program otherwise, which I'm much more familiar with. But when you're looking for how you want this property to be envisioned in the future, both this and the envisioned sustainable infrastructure gives that expectation to anyone coming to look at this property as a developer. And that's exactly what we want to do. And we want the kind of recommendations that give a leg up for our staff, that they're not the ones doing all the making sure it's designed to a certain way. If you have the LEED neighborhood development overlaid on it with Envision, I think you have a greater chance of actually achieving that full picture. So I think that this as a recommendation is a very good one. I want to thank Odessa for the time that she spent in analyzing these, because I think that those recommendations make it a little clearer how to look at it. One of my questions was to Odessa is, so if we take on the LEED neighborhood, is that a cost to the developer?
Through the chair, that's correct. So any costs associated with any of the frameworks, if this recommendation doesn't go forward, all of it is expected to be on the developer because they are going to be the project lead. They are the ones building it out. We kind of wipe our hands off of it as soon as that sale goes through. So we are no longer tied to it in that capacity. We're not the ones going to lead and registering this and submitting all the documents and paperwork. The developer will be.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're not quite wiping our hands of it because we crack it, don't we? So I think that all of this is very important to make the very best we can of our eco village.
Thank you, Councillor Trainer.
Odessa, this is really interesting. I've just been reading more about LEED neighborhoods. It's hard to find examples though, unless I'm not searching right. I think when we do talk about this, to the public and to they're going to want to know what LEED neighborhood development looks like. Councillor Peak said, LEED, people know that when they think of building a house. So yeah, do you have any examples, or do you know of any places where we could, even for ourselves to learn more about it, we could go look?
Yes. So through the chair, you are correct. The examples for LEED neighborhood development, it's tied also to with just the age of the program itself. It is a newer one compared to the overall LEED program. Many of the examples are tied more to urban-based approaches. So you'll see things like in Calgary. If I recall correctly, I think Dockside Green, yeah, is the lead one too. So there's some that are either finished, in progress. They do tend to either have like an institutional approach or a urban kind of seaside approach as well. But they all have the same overall goal, which is to create a community that's sustainable, that uses that checklist and framework as a way to enhance the livability of that space. And it's very much tied to what we're doing. I think, might be a very unique case of it being applied in a small rural community in the Okanagan. And I think that in itself is an even greater reason to potentially approach this, because we can be that first community versus the urban ones that we tend to see where these are applied more often. So we have examples. They may not be exactly the same, but in of itself, they have the same overall intent and approach.
Thank you. Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just found a few of them right here. I think we all have like the Lead ND website up right now, and I'm searching and I just found some. But I really think it's interesting. I mean, I dug into this presentation 3 different times to really get into the different frameworks. I think it's so important to kind of have this grasp on it now at this planning stage. And I think it's so interesting. So I took my time to try and really get my head wrapped around it. And I understand the value of having a recognizable almost brand to our certifications. I thought about how sometimes the other ones are in some ways more flexible. You don't have to have a brand to have an excellent product sometimes. And how much does it cost to get that certification? And it's not that it's not the developer, it's going to be residents who are going to pay that money, right? Or future residents. So, but one thing that I was just kind of thinking about how the BC Zero Carbon Step Code for buildings came in today, would that mean that we could essentially look at building the eco village if we went that route without any gas infrastructure in place? Like just having to eliminate that step altogether? Is there some savings in that way?
Mr. Delvin?
Yeah, through your worship to Council Betts, that is definitely an opportunity. Like if we're trying to think high, don't tell, hopefully BC is not watching this video right now, but no, it's definitely an opportunity with this type of development, is that we can think outside the box as to how we service it, how we develop it. And that goes back to this envisions process. Like, do we need to run shallow utilities for gas through here? If we're targeting a zero carbon future and a sample development, such as the Eco Village development, potentially not.
Okay, Councillor Barkman.
Well, if I recall correctly, I think Vancouver quite a while ago said no new housing can have gas heat or gas cooking and such. So, we're not exactly on the cutting edge of anything here if that's the way we went. I think I understand completely why staff selected this combination of things and why it's necessary. And I'd like to move the discussion forward by moving the staff recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Second, Councillor Van Elfen. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? None opposed, that carries. Yeah. Thank you.
It's not always no. Plowing the winner.
Okay, moving along, no bylaws for adoption, no business arising, any notices of motion? No notices of motion, no items removed from the consent agenda, councillors' reports. Then we have a report. Councillor Peak.
Thank you. I'd like to piggyback on the mayor's report because I want to thank the staff for the workshop on the risks and hazards. Not only was it comprehensive in what we did one heck of a lot of work in 2 days. And I really appreciated the insight from all those that were present at the the discussion in that workshop. We had great staff, we had great people from other organizations, and there was a lot of learning involved in that. We hadn't done it since 2014. I think it was time to do it, and I thought it was excellent. So thank you.
Yeah, somebody told me it's a good thing to talk about bad things sometimes. So. Anyone else? Councillor Van Elfen?
Just a quick update. Sunday, farmer's market was literally rocking. They brought Rotary brought in a band that was unbelievable. And it was quite interesting. You heard all sorts of different feedback. Some people said it was too loud, and other people that were
dancing.
much older than I was or am were dancing and throwing money into their pots. So it was quite the day. It was made the day go quick, that's for sure, but it was an awesome day. Thank you.
So that's how you spent your long weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else? No? So just for myself, I will be zooming into the next council meeting, and the deputy mayor will be chairing it, as I'll be taking my daughter back to university. Any public online for comment? No. So a motion to adjourn, please. Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Betts, all in favor, and that carries.